Oh, I'm here by myself, I guess.
Surprise!
Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm out on the studio floor today, and Corey is in the control room.
Hey y'all, we
You
switched spots.
Yeah, you can switch to our 2 cam if you want to.
Oh, I didn't want to, but now I'll do it.
Hello, here we are. We're definitely like different sizes because I did not adjust everything properly, but
I'm gonna lean back here.
yeah, welcome back. I figured, well, actually, Corey suggested that we switch it up today. So Corey gets to run OBS and the live stream in the back. So if anything goes weird, you know why that is. Man, the sound is something else out here.
Yeah, you're not used to it, huh?
No. Yeah, I can like hear myself just.
Oh, are you getting yourself?
No, but just the room. Like I can, even outside of the headset, I can hear how like much my voice reverberates in here.
Huh. Yeah, it's a whole thing, right?
Yeah.
It would be really great to get some treatment up in there. Did that help? I think you might have been getting yourself for a second there. Is that better?
Maybe a little bit,
Cool.
but
Great.
yeah. Well, here we are. I've got my drawing tablet set up. I've got my laptop over here that's connected to my drawing tablet. I got my iPad, and so I figured we just kind of we're starting a workshop here pretty soon to revolving around animation. So I thought I'd talk about a bunch of different styles of animation. Of course, my strong suit is in 3D animation. So I don't have a whole lot to say about 2D animation, but I can show you some tools to get you started at least. The cool thing is that Blender, the application that I use all the time, has actually a built-in 2D animator as part of it. So I figured we would check out that stuff. So I think I've got the NDI set up for you there, Corey.
Oh yeah, let's see. Let's see what we got.
There should be a two-shot with then my Blender screen here.
Oh yeah, hey.
Do
Let's grab you. There you are. Sorry, I was adjusting my cam. So.
Zooming out a little bit.
Yeah, we're a little more even now.
Sweet. I'm actually going to start a new blend file here, just to show you guys more familiar view of Blender. So when you first start up the program, obviously, and we've kind of gone over Blender stuff before, but this is what you get. Now this doesn't look like much when it comes to 2D animation. But of course, this is how you can start doing some 3D animation. So there's, I guess the most important thing with animation, if we stick to just that instead of learning basic Blender things, your most important feature down here is your timeline. So no matter like what 3D animation software or any kind of animation software you use, there's going to be a timeline with keyframes. And so keyframes are what you use to create your animation. Now, one of the cool things about Blender, and I was talking about this in class, is that like almost every single attribute in Blender, anything over in like your properties panel over here, any of even the modifiers, like if I added, say, an array modifier to this, which essentially just creates like like continuously duplicates the object that you have, you can key this value just by hitting I over it. Moving it along and changing the value, hitting I. This is something you can easily, now I can move my timeline back and forth, and that's animated. I'm not super used to using the, the pen when doing this kind of animation stuff, but you can see here that I've got myself a little animation. Super easy. This would make a cool like audio visualizer thing. All of these you can actually hook up with drivers as well and connect them with audio, which we've kind of done in the past, but we'll have to demo that again sometime. I think did we end up doing that with the animation demo we did with the diner? I can't remember if I showed that off or not.
I can't remember either.
Because I know we did some lip sync stuff, but I don't think I used that tool. I know we did one time, but
or like the audio sync tool thing.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we did all the lip syncing manually.
Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, like I said, the most important feature is your timeline.
There we are.
Okay.
Okay, that's what it is.
So.
Not my fault, folks. I don't want to take credit for that. But hey, yeah, we're just noticing that our stream was silent for a moment, yeah.
So this source,
I just picked the wrong one, so maybe my fault.
There we are.
Okay.
Okay, that's what it is.
Yeah, so I believe that this that one source, that full shot here. Yeah. See, these are the old. This hasn't been updated because I never did a full like. These are all the audience. We can actually probably get rid of these. It just hadn't been updated.
Mm-hmm.
So what we can do is just add in the. If you want to have this full screen, we can have an audio out. Oh, whoops! Audio input and audio input. There should already be the zoom. And then you can add that one in. And now, if I switch to this, it should keep. There's our
cool.
audio that's
Yeah.
played.
I was just like chilling for a minute and like just like looked over and I was like, wasn't there like a meter in that window before?
Mm-hmm. It looks like there might be. Oh yeah, since this is an extra.
I think I added an extra one, accidentally getting confused.
Sorry.
Trying to solve the problem.
Let's see where that one was at.
There
Audio.
it is, yeah.
So this one we can remove.
Yes.
There we go, and then that should
Cool.
go away.
Sorry
There
for
it
technical difficulties, everyone.
No worries. We're all so probably like because I had only been using this particular setup. But if you want to do the full screen of my screen, then you can switch to that one, and now it should have audio.
Cool.
It just hadn't been updated since we got the new board.
Totally. Yeah. So if that's not clear, what would just happen? In OBS, we're switching between these different scenes. So I have access to these different scene controls. I can like preview and then transition between them. So like here's just Jay putting on his headphones.
Hello.
Like here I am. Hello. You know. Here's the two shot. And so as we're cycling through these things, what I didn't know is that each of these scenes can have its own source content. You know. I mean, I guess it's like obvious looking at it and whatnot, but. One of our scenes, the one that we were just on for a few minutes, had no audio input set up on it, or did have an old non-functioning audio input set up on it. So that's why the stream was quiet for a minute, and I apologize for that. Not very informative to watch you clicking around in Blender if you can't hear what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not sure how far I got. Maybe I talked about.
It was like once you move to the timeline.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's been a second. It was like, This is all working great.
That's all right. I will talk about it again real quick.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So let me show you guys that again real quick. Let's do the fast version of it. So I just had a default. This is the default Blender scene, and down here is the timeline. Probably the most important part if you're doing animation. Can't really animate without a timeline. These numbers up here are the frame rate that we've got. Or not the frame rate, but the frames itself. There's a different frame rate, but the frame range, I should say. And so with this, we can start keying in different attributes of this object. So say I want to animate this cube spinning. I can easily do that by either adding in, looking at my transforms here. I can spin this cube. So say I want to rotate it on the Z. I want to have it rotate like 360 around. I can key this in, hitting I on the keyboard while hovering over it, like adds in the key. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Undo. So I can hit I, the little yellow indicates this box changed, so that means there's a keyframe on that frame. I can take this and move it over to say keyframe 20, and you can see it turned green. That's because there is a keyframe there, but it's not, I guess, like a registered keyframe. You can see the second I click on this, 360, that turns orange, then hit I, it turns yellow. So there's little like color indications of what is actually, what's happening there with that keyframe. Then I want to just set my end frame to be 20. And this should, to our eyes, look like it's spinning around very fastly.
Wow.
Yeah. Of course, but the more frames you have in between that, the longer, like the slower it's going to move. So, you got to think about your timing here. That's probably one of the most, personally, that's been one of the most difficult things to get right is the figuring out timing of things. So that's why it's super important to have references in animation. Just like when you're drawing, having a reference is very, very important.
Totally. Did you curve that somehow? I'm noticing that.
Oh yeah.
Like, did I miss that moment?
No. This is actually the default setting for Blender. It adds a easing in and an easing out to your curve. So another version of the timeline that we can look at is the graph editor. You can actually visually see it here. If I zoom out for us a little bit, make this. There we go. So you see that easing in and easing out on the curve? That is the
default behavior.
That's the default, yeah. So we can easily change that. The hotkey, hitting A to select all the keyframes, and then V on the keyboard changes your handle type. So this is, if you've ever done any vector graphics, this should be very familiar. So you can change the handle types. Usually I use vector for this. And now should be a nice smooth edit, a nice smooth spinning animation here. Although some of you may notice, if you're really looking at it, that there is a moment there where it pauses when it loops. If we hide this, you may be able to see it. Those of you that really have a keen eye for this, you'll notice that there is a second there where this animation is actually kind of there's a little hiccup. It's because there is actually, if I pause this, of course now my keyframe is different. This is what I was trying to do earlier. Bring up another window here. There we go. Timeline. I just want the pause button. What's happening here is that at 360 degrees, that's actually 0 as well. So it's playing on keyframe 50 and keyframe 1. It's playing that 360 twice, essentially, because that is the same as 0. So I'll actually want to change this to 359 and enter and re-keyframe that in. And now we should have ourselves a seamless, perfect spinning animation. So it's distracting when you see it looping. So if I hide these, it's a little less obvious. Yeah, so every single one of these, and I mentioned, I think while we were when we lost our audio there, that we have every preference, every single little different option in here is keyframeable. So that even applies to say modifiers. I think I had the array modifier on here before, and the array modifier, and this is actually going to work with the animation since that's the first part. But I can animate this count, so I can have this add more. So I can actually keyframe this value here, which is what I showed in the beginning. Mm-hmm. So say I have 1, I want to key that in, and then maybe we'll have it loop by keyframe 15 or 30 here. Oops, I accidentally added an extra one in here. Let's do keyframe 25. Let's add, we got to key these in first. So I, and then in the center here, let's go, we can get 10 is good. So it should add a bunch of keyframes, add more, and retract them. So there's a lot of cool stuff you could do. It's very fun. Animation is one of my favorite things to bring together in Blender, because it's, you could be working on a 3D model for months and then finally get to edit it or to animate it, and that's really where things start to come to life. I know we've had the 3D model of Corey on here before that was all rigged and ready to animate, and that was a lot of fun. So it really, brings, you can bring your creations to life with animation. So, But this is just some 3D animation stuff. Of course, it gets much more advanced than that. There are a lot of different ways you can look at your, you can see your animation. Like I showed you guys the graph editor. You can actually see here's the graph for the array modifier. You see it adds one, adds one, adds one. Since it's adding an incremental value, there's no smoothing between it, unlike the spin that is, very fine amount of data there. It even goes in between like decimals of percentages. So it breaks it down quite a bit where it's a smooth curve, unlike the array modifier, which I think you can actually change this to a fixed length, and then you can add, it still only goes incremental. There's probably a way that you can make it so that it's adds like only a certain amount of it with length. I know that I've used the along the curve one to do that before. So, but anyways, there's just a short demo. Like I said, there's a bunch of different ways you can see your animations. There's the dope sheet, which I kind of talked about. And I think I was getting into talking about the action editor here. The dope sheet, the biggest difference is that you can actually see over here down at the bottom, you can see where your the different transforms that are being affected. So there's our modifier. You can actually see there's the array modifier. It actually comes out as a string of code there. So modifier array count set to, I guess it's 0 probably because you can have, you can change that value, but there's just the piece of code.
So could you just like write code in there? Could you like create a new transform and just type some code in there and make it work, or is that just a display thing?
Probably. There is definitely ways that you could use script to animate stuff. This particular one, I don't think that you can actually custom write code in here, but if you had a modifier that could input code, most of these modifiers have, I think this actually applies, that 0 maybe apply to the, there it goes. It was showing that because the array modifier, I had deleted it. So now you can see count array.
Hey, yeah.
So it was a 0 value because it was no longer, it didn't exist anymore. So one thing with Blender that's interesting is that if you delete things, they actually stay within the project's like cache. And then if you restart your project, like save it and reload it, those things will then go away. So it like kind of holds on to those things until you reload your project.
Is that like in case you want to undelete it or something like that?
Yeah, I guess so. So like if you're working with materials and you had like a whole bunch of materials here, like I could just like make some new materials, I can like remove this one, make a new one, remove that one, make a new one. But then you see here, all those two have the 0 next to them. So those are the ones that aren't being used currently, but I can still switch to them, and then that 0 goes away. So those are just like essentially slated to be deleted on your next reload. So that's one thing to keep in mind. That's why they have what's called a fake user, or like this little shield icon. I forget what they call it if you hover over it. I don't know if it has a name there, but that little shield.
That little shield.
Yep, that one little thing will keep. See if it actually has. It may have it does. Yeah, fake user. There it is. So essentially, save this data block even if it has no users. So the objects are the users, and so if there's no user, it will delete it. If there is a user, even a fake user, it will keep it. So it's kind of getting a little off track, but that's a useful little piece of info.
It's complex though, like management of your assets.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely keeping track of all of them. They're not all like, it's a lot to think about.
Yeah. So another thing, we sort of briefly touched on the action editor here, but what this allows you to do, I was talking about like importing, say if you wanted to import this into a game engine, you could do that. And objects, when you export them from Blender, have animation data attached to them or baked into that object. You can separate it. Most of these things you can separate, like you can separate materials, you can separate the models, you can separate the animation data, but it's nice when it's all baked together. So what this allows you to do here in the action editor is create multiple actions. So say you had a character that was had like a walk cycle, a run cycle, a jump, a punch, a kick, All those things could be here in your action editor. So right now the cube has the one cube action. If I actually say I want to make this a fake user because I want to keep this action, but if I close this and I play this, get my thing is still not quite perfectly. There we go. And then make another timeline. I just need the play button here. But see, I got rid of that action, and now it's not doing anything. If I go back and add this in, so you can see the little F next to it is the fake user. I can add that back, and there's back again. So you can start to like add a bunch of different types of animation things here. Do you want to reset this? I don't know, it probably works a little bit weird with the modifiers. I don't think you can really bake in that to animation. I've never tried to export that to a game engine before, but it's just as an example that you can animate pretty much anything.
Oh, right, yeah, so you'd have to like the audio equivalent would be like freezing and flattening the thing, right? But there's no such option for you here.
Yeah, you'd have to like bake that into the animation somehow. I'm actually not sure how you could do that. There's probably a function somewhere, but it's not something that I would really want to do and then export to a game engine or something. But I could make, say, like a little, like a jumping animation for the cube here. I can reset all my, I'm gonna go to transforms, or clear, and you can clear your different options. I just want to just clear the scale, and then say I want to make like a little jumping animation. If I hit I while I'm hovering over this menu, I can add in a keyframe on whatever I want. So I'm just going to do location, rotation, scale, and you can see it added down there in the action editor. So now I have cube action 1. It made a new action for me. And I can make a little jump, maybe. I want to change this to scale based on the 3D cursor, because that's down at the bottom. Otherwise, the origin's like right here in this cube, so if I scaled it, it would scale down to this center point. But if I scale now, it will scale down to the ground. So I'm going to make them jump a little bit. So, of course, one little rule of squashing an object, there's always that volume, so you got to add the volume in. God. YouTube Kids videos, so the transcripts and comments are disabled. Oh, really?
Huh. Let me see if I can.
Oh, good to know. Yeah, I think. Oh, yeah. So I think by default I set that up so that our students with their school emails can get to. The reason why I set that up that way is so that our students can get to those videos, because their school emails will lock out if they're not made for kids. It will lock out. You won't be able to access them, I believe. I may be wrong, but as far as I understand, that's why I've been setting them to YouTube Kids. If there's been issues, let me know. But I'll have to check on that. But one thing, just real quick with animation, a good little tip is that think about the mass of your object, the volume of your object. So when I took this cube, I also squashed it out so that it kept some of that volume. So now I can key in that location, rotation, scale. So it squashes down like that. Mm-hmm. So it's much better than just like it actually looks like it's being squashed, not just
shrinking.
Shrinking, exactly. And then with this, I can go a few more frames and then scale it back out. And I was going to shrink it a little bit because I want it to be taller. Grab it and have them kind of jump up. Whee! Cue this in. Key. Whee! So may want to add a holding frame here. So duplicate this over just so it holds for a second. Maybe even scale it down a little bit more just so it has some anticipation. There we go. Oh, see, I moved the timeline before I keyed it in, so it didn't save. I have to make sure to lock that in.
Yeah, hey.
And then there's that bounce, give it a little bit more airtime. I'm gonna change it, clear its scale. That way it resets it back to normal. Location, rotation, scale, boing.
Hey.
And then it drops down.
Man, super cool.
Maybe it gets a little bit of squash. Scale it down on the Z. And scale, location, rotation. There you go. And then back to normal, yeah. So like super simple, this is another action. Just thinking about those basic animation principles really brings your animations to life. So that's probably one of the easiest ones to remember, I think, is just like being aware of the volume of your object. Oh yeah, that it disables comments and things. Yeah, I'm not sure. There may be a way around it. I'll have to look into it. But if you have any comments, you can always come and ask us. So that helps when the creator of the video is available to show you how to do whatever it is you're trying to do. So yeah, there's our little animation. So that is a second. That is now a separate action of this cube. So if I were to export this to a game engine, we'd have one that was the spin here, and I can make these the same animation length. It doesn't really matter actually if you have a cycle that's 50 frames or not. One way to retime an animation is just to scale it down. So all the same like grab, rotate, scale, all that stuff works in the timeline. So it's very nice. So I just scaled that animation so it spins a little bit faster. Of course, the scale is now messed up. But because it actually is keeping the scale from the previous animation. So that is one thing to note, that if you do not key all your different transforms over here, it's going to transfer it to the other animations as well. So now if I go back to this one, now it should not be squished. So there's our spin. I'll switch to our other action, make it a fake user, and there's our jump. So now if we imported this, we would see both the jump and the spin as two separate pieces of data within this object. So you could key that out, code it out so that when you hit spacebar, it jumps, and when you hit W, it spins or something. So very cool.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of basic animation stuff. You could definitely get way more into this. There's options for, whoops, if I can get in the menu here, there's options for the NLA editor, which is an interesting tool where you can stack animations on top of each other and loop animations and like kind of have smooth transitions between animations.
So that's like how you like get your walk cycle and your root motion together kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit finicky. I hope that they update this in the future. I feel like it's definitely one of the features that hasn't got very much attention lately. The whole like animation pipeline could definitely use an update. It still like works, but it's definitely some of the features are a little bit dated. The NLA editor is one of them that I would love to be able to use more, but the functionality of it sometimes is a little bit weird. So I tend to, if I'm doing like a long animation, I like to have it all animated together instead of piecing it together like in this. The only reason I would do these separate actions is, say, like I was mentioning, importing into a game or something like that. We wouldn't really want to like stack these, but I could. I could totally add in. That's a little bit weird. I got to go back to the dope sheet. And then I want the action editor. I want to open up my jump animation here. I could push this down, and that pushes it down into the NLA editor. Of course, I could have both these open, but now it should actually spin. And although this is overwriting, so you have to like blend. You could combine these two. It should spin, if I remember, if I'm doing this right. Combine one of these options. Like I said, I'm not super familiar with this, and it doesn't always work the way you'd think it would work. Like you'd think this would combine the two together, but it doesn't seem to want to do that. So it is a very interesting tool. I definitely have not mastered it yet. It does have some really useful stuff to it, but like I said, I think about the only thing I really ever do in here is if I need something to like continuously loop, like say if I had like a fire or something that I had animated, you can turn on, you can, in here, in this deep menu here, there's options to repeat, so you can like loop this. So say I had like a super long animation and I just wanted this object to repeat. Like say if you had like a spinning sign or something, or like a, I don't know, some static object that just has an animation to it. Like maybe you had one of those little, the beckoning cats or something with the arm that moved back and forth, and it's just like a cycling motion. You could go in here in the NLA editor and just do the repeat, and then it would repeat over and over again. And so no matter how long my animation is here, this will just keep repeating until it stops. So it can be kind of useful. So that's about the only thing I really use the NLA editor for. But it's nice in this, oh my gosh, I wish it would stay open. This kind of breaks it down. Here's all the animation things. I don't ever use drivers, really. Sometimes they're pretty complicated, but.
What even is that? That XY thing is looking surprising.
Yeah, this is a good question. To be quite honest with you, it's something that I probably cannot explain properly, is what it is.
Fair enough.
I feel like I would probably say the wrong thing if I try to explain it, but
Sure.
Essentially you can add in some, I think it's, the only time I've ever used drivers is connecting them with like, technically using the audio, like if you import an audio, a WAV file, and plugging that into the like transform of an object, that's using a driver. You're attaching one thing to it to control another thing. That's about as simple as I can make it. And quite honestly, this menu, I'm not quite sure how this all works. There's something to do with like right-clicking this, add a driver, and then so it turns purple. And at that point, honestly, I think you then connect this somehow to select about, you can connect this to another value. So it's like connecting two values together to create an animation that way. So the same with like the wave file just takes the volume level and ties that to the a transform. So they can get very complicated. You can also use drivers for animation too, for like like bones and things like that in a character's rig. Speaking of bones, for those of you who sticking a little bit more with 3D animation here for a second, and then I'll show you some 2D stuff. Adding a bone in Blender works both in 3D and in 2D, so it's good to know if you're doing 2D or 3D animation in Blender. The armature, this little thing, there's a bone, very exciting by itself, but this has, its own mode. Its own mode, the pose mode.
Oh, pose mode.
Yes, and pose mode is essentially a special animation mode that you can use to animate characters. So this is what you would use to, if I wanted to say, I could take this in edit mode and create like a rig here, like really basic. This is a terrible rig. Don't like try to make a rig like this, but you can then take this, you could make an object around it, and these do not show up in your render. So when you go to render something, bones don't show up. All they are is a control object, and bones can be weighted. So just like real bones, our bones are attached to our muscles and then to our skin. You can do the same thing with the digital bones and attach them to your character's skin or their muscles or whatever they have, and then use them to control their bodies or their whatever it might be. It could be even a door. Sometimes you could use bones to like animate a sign or to animate a door swinging open and stuff like that. So they give you a bit more functionality and a bit more like control over your object. So here we go into pose mode. You can see I can they're tied together, so those bones are in a chain. So if this was like the arm or a tree trunk or something was attached to a branch here, it very much if the base of the branch moves, then the rest of the arm or the branch moves. So if I had more branches here of my little tree, and then go into pose mode, you can see if I move the first one in the chain, then all the other ones move. Same with this one. Very much how our arm moves. If you move your shoulder, you can't really move your shoulder and not move your forearm, or if your bicep is moving, then your forearm is moving. Unless something really bad is wrong, happening, then hopefully your forearm is moving with your bicep there, unless somehow it got disconnected, which would not be a good thing. You probably have bigger problems than worrying about how to animate your characters. So, but yeah, that's bones are very useful for that. They work in both 3D and in 2D. So let's talk about 2D for a second. Blender has a great option that you can go right into a 2D, like a preset setup for you. So going to new, and you got a few here. There's sculpting and VFX. It just does not like me hovering. In video editing. So this gives you a great idea of some of the awesome capabilities that Blender has. Going right into 2D editing or 2D animation, this will look sort of familiar, almost like more like Krita or any drawing, Clip Studio or anything like that. You get your nice white canvas with all your color options and your different brushes and all that good stuff. So I can go over here, change colors, and draw on the surface of my tablet here. So the great thing about this is that this is set up just for doing 2D animation. It gets really deep, and a lot of this is actually they're newer features. The whole, they call it grease pencil in Blender, is a very, it's been updated quite a bit in the past few years to feature some really cool tools. And it's great because this maybe look 2D right now, but it's still a 3D scene. So I can still add in, if I switch out of draw mode and into regular object mode, I can still add into cube. And the great thing is, if I go back into draw mode, I have to select my stroke object, go into draw mode, and go back into my camera view. There's a cube right there. I can actually use that, say, let's make it a little more obvious, rotate this around. A little bit hard to see. I go into, I could change our viewport here. Where's my, I don't have a good, maybe solid view would be better. There we go. So here you can see there's the 3D cube. We can use this as a reference, built right in. I know that there's a lot of, I know Clip Studio, for one, has a built-in thing kind of like this that you can import a model or any other 3D asset and draw all over it as a reference, which is great. 3D references are awesome because you can put them wherever you want and then do your drawing over the top of them. So switching into draw mode, we've got this great cube here to draw over. Oh, well. Here's the thing, is this 3D object is actually, the stroke here is the 3D object as well, so I need to move my cube back so that it is not in the way of my drawing. Let's see, location, I want to move this back on the Y, I believe, and that should let me draw over the top of it, yep. Because it's actually, the object here, the stroke in the scene, is actually floating in 3D, so you have to be aware of your, of the distance between your objects and things like that. So, so it's kind of an interesting take on 2D animation in a 3D environment. But I can draw. This is kind of an interesting pen. But you can see I can use this cube as a reference. So the neat thing is that if I took this cube and animated it, I can actually draw this as a reference. So let me do that real quick. Let me go, or use this like an animation as a reference. So let's just, let's start from here. Hit I on the keyboard, whoops. It is already keyed in, I believe, yeah. And then go to frame, I don't know, 120. Spin this around. Keep spinning it. Let's do a full, I don't know what that would be. Actually, maybe make this easier on us and try to add and make this 0. And key that in. And there you go. Oh, it's already on. So one little thing with animation, this this option down here, this little tiny blue dot or white dot, toggles on like auto keyframing. So that is why when I spin this, it's automatically keying in what the transforms that I made. So it automatically keys in stuff, which is super useful. Sometimes it's you forget that it's on, like I just did. And you can accidentally key in things that you didn't mean to, and stuff starts moving all over the place, even though you didn't mean to animate it. But it's definitely something to be aware of. Oh yeah, the Blender. I mean, it really opens up a whole world of possibilities when you have a full 3D environment to animate with. So actually, let's make sure we do our 359 here. Make sure that's keyed in. Now it should spin. So there's our little spin animation. We can make this 120. And then let's actually, I want to switch this to action editor real quick. Select these, hit V, turn it to vector. That way it doesn't do the weird like slow down and speed up thing. I don't know how I got so many keys in there. Must be for something else, not sure. There we go. Okay. And we got our nice spinning cube. Go back to our grease pencil. This is a different timeline. Go into, switch to the stroke object, go to draw node. And now, this is the cool part. You've got in here, there's your animation. So I can start drawing those keyframes with the cube there as a reference. So I can draw this base one. You can see how this could be really neat. Go a frame. Maybe I could go a few frames. Let's go like 4 frames. Or let's go 5. Just to really see. You see right away, see that green outline? That is my onion skin. So I can see the reference before. Don't really need it with this because I'm doing this kind of manually, or doing the following the reference of the cube. So I don't necessarily need onion skinning. Normally you would use your previous keyframe as a good, as a reference of where you should draw your next frame. But since you have this awesome 3D reference here, you don't necessarily need it. Oops, say I forgot a line there. But you can see how doing this can really, you could do your animations in 3D and then go through with the grease pencil and draw out your animations. So I don't know if I'll do this whole thing. It might take me a second, even a basic cube. But this already gives me that perspective. I don't have to think about what perspective I need to use. I don't have to I don't have to worry about. I think the technical term, the artist term, is foreshortening, where things closer to the camera are larger than things further away. It is perspective too, but there's other terms for it. So if you see characters drawn where their hand or whatever is closer to the camera and therefore is much larger than the rest of the character, it's a technique you can really use to make things much more realistic. So I'm just using I've got my hand over here on my laptop because I'm using the arrow keys to move back and forth between the keyframes to make it a little quicker to navigate here. So just drawing out each of these, not worrying about how great it looks, but let's see, we can, I think.
It'll have that cool wobbly aesthetic.
Yeah, that's one way you could. So the neat thing is with this, it's, I'm drawing every frame. A lot of times, most animators will have, you've probably seen it if you watch any kind of animated show where they call them puppets, I think. I think that's the term that's used because they're drawn characters, 2D characters, but they use the bones and stuff as sort of having a 2D rig for your character.
Oh, I think I've seen that.
You've probably seen it, yeah.
Yeah, You notice it in like games for sure, like where there's like some like physics on the 2D thing, but I've like see that same sort of look in animation as well, and that must be the workflow they're doing.
Yeah, there's a lot of programs that do that, and you can do the same in this. You can like because all these, like this is 3D. You can see it there. There's my little grease pencil.
Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah, you could take that and weight that to a bone, and then animate that piece of drawing into whatever you wanted. So I'm just looking through this one perspective. So I know we're getting close here. Let me do.
Yeah, I was just about to give you a time warning.
Yeah, let me do one more drawing here. There we go. Let's see what that looks like. 60 frames is pretty good. So we can hide that cube. There goes the cube, and we can play this animation. You can see it spin around. So it's pretty slow.
It's cool though.
But I can, if I wanted to go faster, I can select all these, scale it down. Maybe we'll go 30 frames. And maybe we can play this back here. Shorten our time of our animation. Oh, frame rate is another big thing to think about. There you go. So yeah, there's a 3D cube drawn in 2D. Like you can kind of tell.
Yeah.
If I did the whole thing, it would probably look a lot better, but it gives you a good idea. One thing I can change is...
It's such a cool aesthetic. Like
it's neat.
Yeah, it's really great. I'm like, I want to try doing that.
One thing with common with 2D is to actually render out a lower frame rate than 24 FPS. 24 FPS is like the cinematic standard, but you could go and custom frame rate and do 12.
12 is more common for animation, right?
Yeah, it's pretty common. So because like really fluid animation looks great, but it's a lot of work because then you're drawing all those frames in there. So, oh really? You got some reference to combining grease pencil with 3D. Yeah. So like sometimes if you're just building your environments in 3D and then doing, maybe you're doing your camera work in 3D. I've seen that done before. Like they'll build say you have like a cityscape or something, and you have somebody like parkouring through the city. You can like do the 3D models of the city, and then have that character like draw, like have all your camera animations in and everything, and then just use like over the camera, you're just drawing like your 2D character into that scene. So it's a really cool workflow.
Oh yeah, that sounds really cool.
So there's a lot of neat stuff that you can do.
I feel like there's also like an intermediate thing where you have like a sprite or something, like essentially like sprite style animation, like where you're moving a 2D character around, like you maybe have a looping animation that moves around in a 3D space or something.
Right. So I had, I guess we got a brief minute here. If we wanted to go to the over the shoulder shot.
Where is that at? Oh yeah, I gotta switch you on the A10. Boom, 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 boom. Here we go.
So this is my bad for a bad angle, but on here is this is Procreate on the iPad. So of course, if you only have access to an iPad, there are tons and tons of awesome resources for doing 2D animation. 3D animation, I'm not quite sure. I haven't dug into that yet.
It feels like the touch screen, it doesn't lend itself to that work.
Yeah.
It's like very, very input heavy, the stuff that you do with Blender.
Right. The interesting thing about this, I could actually, like sitting right here, one thing, and we've talked about this before, this is a funny little tidbit about the screens that you're drawing on too. This tablet has a very like matte finish to it. The iPad, on the other hand, is very glossy. Very much different drawing experience with the Apple Pencil and the Hauyon pencil here. Very much more like this has a closer to paper feel than the tablet does. So
a lot of people really like their paper feel screen protectors.
Oh yeah, I gotta try one of those at some point.
Yeah, we might have a spare one. Oh, you have a different model than we have.
So yeah, so this has this is Clip Studio.
3 minutes.
It has animation, so maybe it's something we could go over later because it's something I don't really know a lot about. But built-in animation stuff, really cool. Definitely recommend checking it out. Can do some great things. I know that this is a program that people use a lot for this kind of animation work. It's probably one of the neatest things is that you can get the app on the iPad and then have it on your desktop as well, and be able to cloud save. So you could be working on something on your iPad, have an animation going, and then take it over onto your computer and have that right there. You just open your project file. Yeah, it's a pretty cool workflow. So
one thing that's a drag about trying to do stuff on the iPad is that it can feel a little like a closed ecosystem, or like it's difficult to move things on and off of it unless you have an Apple computer. So anything that integrates well with the cloud is really helpful, just to break you out of your little tablet and connect it to the bigger world. 1 minute, Jay.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll wrap it up. All right, well, I had fun. I want to show, it's very hard to cover all this cool stuff, all this animation stuff in Blender. I do want to do another project with us doing something with sound and animation. I feel like that'd be really fun. So lots of neat things going on, lots of cool stuff here at MARZ. If you want to learn anything about this, let us know.
Come on down.
Yep, but you can suggest videos also if you want us to do something specific. I'm going to try my best to show it off. I'm more of a jack of all trades than I am good at any particular thing. So we can at least point you in the right direction of resources and stuff like that. So
come learn with us. We'll figure it out together.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
All right, cool. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up for tonight, and we'll see y'all next week.
Take it easy, everyone.
All righty.